Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to another tropical advisory here by Agent Weather Forecast. And we have some significant updates here on now PTC3, which stands for Potential Tropical Cyclone here. So we now no longer have Invest 92L, and we are looking at for this to develop into a tropical storm Claudette within the next 24 hours. Landfall is going to be within the next 36 hours, and we want to go ahead and get a look here at the new cone and forecast by the National Hurricane Center as well. We're going to be covering the impact and as well overall threats for the regions looking at for tomorrow overnight into the 20th. So if you have not already done so, be sure to subscribe to the channel as well. If you live within the forecasted area, I would also consider subscribing so you guys can get fast updates on the tropics here. I'm planning on doing 2 videos tomorrow, so be sure to stay tuned on that. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get in the tropical advisory forecast. So here's a look now at the new National Hurricane Center forecast. So there we got potential tropical cyclone 3. And for those who are new to weather, overall just aren't too knowledgeable on the tropics, PTC is basically something you see when it's definitely not worth being an invest, but it's not organized enough to be a tropical depression. So basically, it's a potential tropical cyclone. So it hasn't really officially formed yet, but it's basically saying it's definitely getting towards developing here. We saw the exact same thing last year with Isaias. It was a PTC for a while, and then it finally became tropical storm Isaias. But this one, we're expecting this to be officially a tropical storm within the next 24 hours. So we're not expecting this to be PTC too long. Right now, it has maximum sustained winds of 30 miles an hour, which was actually found on the recon that went out a few hours ago. It now has minimal central pressure to 1,008 millibars, and it's moving north at 9 miles an hour. So you can kind of see there's a big difference to the location as where it is now and where it was yesterday. So this relocation that happened last night definitely gave the storm a lot of potential. So there we still have a 90% for the next 48 hours and a 90% for the next 5 days. So like I did say, hasn't formed yet, but it still has that formation potential forecasted. And we actually do have a lot of interesting maps that came out from the National Hurricane Center now that this is the PTC. So we have a lot of updates. So if you live in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, or even Texas, I would consider you guys keep watching this video as we're going to start getting a little bit more detailed into what we're expecting here. But let's go ahead and look at what we're seeing on IR forecast. So here's look now at the new satellite imagery, visible satellite imagery, and here's this low pressure kind of, it's really opened up at the moment here. It's kind of right there, placed into the northeastern portion of the Bay of Campeche, and kind of located in the south central Gulf of Mexico. And you can kind of see this has some really good organized eastern quadrant and eastern banding, but on the other hand, these western quadrants are kind of really open right now. There is very little convection to no convection at all. You can kind of see there's a little bit of lightning strikes, but that kind of has really died off. So we're kind of just seeing regular old scattered rain showers. But these eastern quadrants are a lot more stronger and they're actually embedded with actual convection. Here you can kind of see we're seeing some really good lightning strikes in those eastern quadrants. And when you start to see lightning strikes within PTCs, obviously that means they're obviously kind of going through a strengthening phase. So that's kind of maybe a reason why they do have this as an PTC and no longer an invest, is because it's got lightning. It's continuing to have a lot more lightning. So obviously you wouldn't expect that to be an invest, but it's just too unorganized right now to even be a tropical depression, which is why we have PTC. So that's exactly what we have. A lot of convection developing those eastern quadrants. It's exactly why we're watching out for our hardest hit state to be eastern Louisiana, Mississippi, and even portions of Alabama, because these eastern quadrants will be a big threat from now on to the actual landfall, bringing the strongest winds, and obviously strongest winds will be aligned for those larger waves, and larger waves obviously leads up to bigger storm surge, and bigger storm surge ultimately leads to bigger flooding. So obviously these eastern quadrants may not look like anything now, but by landfall these will do a decent amount of impacts here for the coast here. Here's a look now at the first advisory here for PTC3, and there you see we do have tropical storm warnings that have been issued all the way from the south central coast of Louisiana to the border of Alabama and Florida. So these warnings are kind of located into those areas we're watching out for those northeastern quadrants. So you can kind of see we don't have really any warnings there for those western coasts outside of that area of landfall, but we have a ton way to the east. And you're probably wondering, why do we have so many warnings to the east and far to the east, but none to the west. And that's because these western quadrants really won't do much at all. They could bring in some rain, but they won't even have that much significant flooding. But with the eastern quadrants, we have that kind of counterclockwise spin. So if it makes landfall right here, you're going to be seeing that counterclockwise spin, bringing in the strongest winds to this region, meaning the strongest storm surge, and as well overall those northeastern quadrants, which will be obviously to the northeast of that low, kind of right here, will bring in the most intense storms and overall heaviest rainfall. So that's exactly why we do have those tropical storm warnings far to the east and none to the west. So we're looking at areas like Morgan City, New Orleans, areas as well into Gulfport, Mobile, and just to the west of Pensacola is where we have these tropical storm warnings. At the moment, we don't have any tropical storm watches. We may, once we get closer to landfall, have a little bit more watches, maybe for the western portions. But at the moment, we only have warnings. So we're expecting this to be a tropical storm as early as tomorrow at 1 o'clock. So tropical storm within the next, most likely we're talking about a tropical storm within the next 20 hours. So right now I'm looking at depression throughout the overnight hours here. Most likely going to be a depression. So like I did say, it won't be a PTC for that long, and then it makes landfall right there near Morgan City into southeastern and just overall east central Gulf Coast, east central Louisiana coast. Then it weakens to a depression as it goes near areas like Hattiesburg, so it kind of goes into areas near Baton Rouge and New Orleans, and then it goes deep into Dixie Alley. And we're even watching out for this to even be an overall depression, not even a post-tropical depression or just extratropical system. This will still be a fully developed tropical depression all the way up into the Blue Ridge Mountains and Appalachian Mountains. So I'm actually writing this cone here, so maybe I can get some good footage for you guys. But this is definitely a odd type. This is definitely a odd like system you would see here in June. If anything, for June, these beta Camp PD storms, you kind of see them go kind of up the Mississippi River like that. But this one's going to go take a sharp northeast turn like you kind of see something in a late season type storm. So let's now go ahead and get a look here at the storm surge forecast now that we finally had this, now that it is a PTC. So we're watching out for any type of storm surge all the way from Cameron, Louisiana, which is kind of where Laura and kind of where Delta made landfall. So we're going to continue to kind of see a area to watch out for, even storm surge all the way up to near the Texas border. Obviously, like I did say, there really won't be much of a western quadrant threat, but there still will be some storm surge because there's still going to be these winds kind of wrapping around, obviously, if it wants to be fully tropical. So we are still going to be seeing some effects here and big enough waves to bring in maybe a foot storm surge all the way over there. But the main area to watch out for storm surge, like I did say and mention, it's going to be, in my opinion, obviously not just my opinion, but just straight up facts, that the worst storm surge and the highest storm surge will kind of be between the Mississippi coast all the way up to portions of eastern and central Louisiana. Obviously, we're kind of expecting landfall to be like right here. So obviously, anything to the northeast basically is where we'll be watching out for that worst storm surge. And obviously, Alabama and Mobile Bay is going to be way too far east to get that much, 2 to 3 feet. But we do have 1 to 3 feet, so still getting up to 3 feet for the maximum. But overall, watching out from all the way from Intracoastal City all the way up to the Mississippi and Alabama border. As well, we have Lake Pontchartrain. Honestly, I'm not even sure why I even tried to pronounce that. And Lake Maripas. I feel stupid trying to pronounce whether it's native or these French names, but either way, I cannot name these. But you get the point here, kind of where we have the New Orleans region. So we are watching out for a pretty widespread 2 to 3 feet range. If you guys don't have an idea what 1 foot storm surge will be, it's basically if you just got really heavy rain for days. If you got 2 feet storm surge, it's kind of going to be right on the top of the tires on your car. And a 3 foot storm surge is actually enough to lift up the car. So obviously we're not talking deadly storm surge. We're not talking devastating storm surge or even major storm surge at all. We're talking about minimal storm surge, but 3 feet is still enough to lift up a car. I mean, that's been proven, and it's been a study that 3 feet is enough to lift up a car and kind of take it down a stream a little bit down the road or something like that. So obviously 3 feet is going to be the max here. Maybe they may increase it. These storm surge, obviously storm surge these numbers will most likely stay the same, but they could change. Specifically, these may change Maybe this storm gets stronger than expected, or if it's weaker than expected, these will most likely be the biggest impacted if they do change. But let's not go ahead and get a look here at the cone forecast and overall strength. So here's looking at the potential tropical cyclone 3 forecast and cone and all about the strength. So obviously you kind of already saw the cone, but let's go ahead and get a look at the strength. So by obviously tomorrow they have it getting up to a tropical storm, 40 miles an hour. And then they do have it there at 45 miles an hour by Saturday early morning. So they do have the peak at being at 45 miles an hour and then being 25 miles an hour all the way up to northeast Georgia, exactly where I live. Actually, I think that white line's perfectly over my house. So we're going to be kind of see it gradually decreasing in strength, obviously, as it goes over land. But they do have a 45 mile an hour. They do have a 45 mile an hour peak, which I do think is definitely agreeable. It's definitely agreeable, but I do think that overall global models and overall even the National Hurricane Center are maybe underestimating this. I am predicting anywhere from a 50 to 60 mile an hour peak. So obviously I could be wrong and they could be right, or they could be wrong and I could be right. But overall, I do think 45 is definitely, for now, an agreeable peak. Since this was their first advisory, so you don't want to start off aggressive. But I definitely do think they're being a little bit more conservative when it comes to this first advisory. But I do think we can definitely see a stronger peak than 45 miles an hour. I don't want to sound like a freaking hyper, or I don't want to sound like I'm trying to make things sound like a lot worse. I just think overall global models and National Hurricane Center are underestimating the conditions. But let's not go ahead and get a look here at the models. So here's looking at the 12Z GFS, and the reason why I did not make this video before 18 or after 18Z is because I want to have this video out as soon as possible ever since the advisory came out from the National Hurricane Center. Let's go ahead and see what the 12Z GFS is showing. So they actually do have a landfall this is going to be here by Saturday, or no, Friday night, which will be tomorrow night, or very early Saturday morning. So this can definitely be an overnight landfall, which is why I'll be watching out for a pretty big threat for some overnight tornadoes, most likely overnight threat overall, including storm surge. So obviously, even though the good thing is it's going to be a very weak system, or maybe anywhere from a weak to moderate tropical storm, the storm surge will be very minimal, so we're not watching out for deadly storm surge coming in at night or anything like that. Let's not go ahead and get a look here at vorticity, and the reason why this was not organized enough to be tropical depression not only is because it does not have it has no convection whatsoever on the western quadrants, but because it actually does not have much vorticity at all in those western quadrants. It's kind of right there in the eastern quadrants is where you have that vorticity. So people are kind of underestimating the storm because there's really no rotation. But watch, this just takes time. It takes time and patience. And that's why that cone of development goes all the way up to the Louisiana coast, because it may take a while for this to get a lot of vorticity, but just before landfall, it does get a decent amount of vorticity and a good amount of vorticity to make this a decent tropical storm just before landfall. And this is according to the GFS. Let's now go ahead and get a look here at the European vorticity forecast map. So obviously, as well, they kind of have this vorticity all scattered out, but they have it really getting its act together before landfall. That's going to be the 19th at 0Z or UTZ. So we're getting up to around 8 o'clock. And then right before landfall at around 11 o'clock p.m. to maybe even 2 a.m. is where we'll be watching out for that landfall. Then kind of get some really strong vorticity. So Europeans actually showing this having some really, really strong vorticity, a lot stronger than what the GFS is showing. And then down 12 kilometer as well, seeing as well a pretty decent amount of vorticity with it as well on 500 millibars. Even 850 millibars, obviously a little bit closer to the surface. We're seeing a really good, very, very good signal or overall reading for the area of vorticity. So obviously we're going to be seeing a ton of rotation within the atmosphere, and obviously this is expected to be subtropical rotation, so that will allow it to be fully tropical, especially if it's subtropical the whole way around this low pressure. That's exactly why we be seeing those big areas of more high storm surge all the way up to Mississippi and Alabama because of this kind of clockwise spin and vorticity there as well. This can very well spin up some tornadoes as well, because overall this will allow for a ton of helicity in the inland side of things. So right now we're kind of looking at the tropical side of things, but in the end of the video we'll kind of look at the severe weather side of things as a result of the tropical landfall. So let's go ahead and get a look at shear. So right now this low pressure location has it kind of right here. Actually, no, that's not true. It's kind of right here. So all that shear to the north right now. So it's kind of just to the southeast of that shear. So if it does get any bet or bigger, I mean, there could be some shear to the west, and that could be the only reason why there is not much developing shear or start developing convection or thunderstorms overall in the western quadrant. It could be because of shear, but right now, overall, that main low pressure is in an area of less than 15 knots. Oops, I did not want to go that far out. As we now go later into the 18th, as the storm kind of goes to the north central portion of the Gulf, this shear dramatically decreases, and we kind of have a whole alley of no shear. So shear should not be a problem. And then by the 19th of landfall, there it is kind of just no shear whatsoever within this area or trough. So it's looking very, very good. As well, dryer should not be an issue as well. So it looks like the shear is going to be the problem, at least for the next few hours. And as that clears out, it should definitely become a tropical storm. So as you do see, we do have a pretty large moisture bubble according to the European, and that'll only get bigger. And obviously, we're going to be seeing a ton of moisture and really high humidity and dew points. And for a portion of Dixie, which will as well raise the probability for severe weather. Let's not go ahead and look at the 10-meter wind speed here for, this is going to be miles an hour for the GFS. So GFS, I do think, in my opinion, is somewhat kind of, I wouldn't say underestimating it, but I think they're definitely kind of following the rest of the models here, getting up to 52 miles an hour. Obviously, 52 miles an hour is definitely possible. Like I did say in my intro, I do think there could be a peak of anywhere from 50 to 60 miles an hour, but I just think they're kind of a little bit on the lower side because they have it for a little bit of a second for 50 miles an hour and then kind of have it into the 40s. But overall, can be some decent strong gusts. So the actual sustained wind shouldn't be that strong according to the GFS. But if we actually go to the actual gusts, we're talking about a different story here. Actually, no, 18Z is just loading as we speak. So let's go back to 12Z here. Oh, only if I made my video a little bit earlier or a little bit later here. So we're going to be looking at maybe 40 mile an hour, 45 mile an hour gusts, and that'll even continue up to 30 mile an hour gusts near Atlanta. And the NAM 3 kilometer, they're being the typical NAM, they are showing up to 65 miles an hour sustained. However, like I did say, I feel like overall Icon, CMC, GFS are kind of us underestimating the storm just a little bit. I'm not saying NAM's going to be right and we're going to be seeing a high-end tropical storm, but that's where I'm getting my 60 mile an hour gust or my 60 mile an hour max wind is possible, because I do think that the global models are not really considering how good the conditions are. They're considering how it's not a storm yet, so it's not going to get strong. But, I mean, this thing is moving at 9 miles an hour, and it should be getting pretty good overnight if it goes through a diurnal maximum, which should be expected, especially as shear decreases. So I do think that the NAM, I'm not going to say the NAM's right, but I think the NAM is going to be maybe closer than what the global models are showing here, because right now National Hurricane Center has a 45 mile an hour peak, and that's peak. I mean, that's basically a tropical storm, just makes it by a little bit. Specifically, or if you want to be technical, it makes it only by 6 miles an hour. And my prediction's anywhere from 50 to 60, and then the NAM is showing up to, I believe, 65 miles an hour. So, I mean, I do think that the NAM does have a chance to be a little bit closer, because let's say it's a 60 mile an hour peak. Obviously, 65 is closer than 45. So, overall, I think the NAM's not going to be 100% correct, nor will they be even 80% correct. But I do think they do have a chance to be decent, because a lot of people are saying, oh, the NAM's drunk, oh, the NAM's being the typical NAM, all because they don't agree with the global models. And a lot of times, global models can be underestimating with tropics, specifically GFS and CMC. They love underestimating. And the European's actually not showing it that weak, actually. The European doesn't have it, actually. Is one of the only global models I see that's actually showing it decent. 59 miles an hour though for the next 23 hours, and they kind of have it up to 65 miles an hour, and then they have it weakening. So they only have it at 65 miles an hour, and we're going to be seeing maybe sustained winds of up to 40, maybe 32 miles an hour, and that'll continue to bring in some gusty winds, sustained wind anywhere from 13 to 20 miles an hour across portions of Alabama and Georgia. Let's not go ahead and get a look here at the overall track of these global models and computer models, and a lot of them have now shifted to Louisiana and even Mississippi. So a lot of them were showing Texas earlier today. I don't know why they were showing Texas, but I'm not sure why they were showing Texas earlier today. But now they're all back to Louisiana, specifically either eastern or the central coast waters of Louisiana. Let's now shift a little bit now towards the severe weather side of things. So severe weather, obviously something to keep a close eye on. So we're watching these outer bands to start bringing rain as early as tomorrow morning. Yes, tomorrow morning we're talking about these outer bandings 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, already seeing outer bandings likely to bring in some heavy rain. These really won't be any thunderstorms. But as we now go later now to around the evening hours, it's going to get a lot closer to landfall. So then we're start seeing those intense outer bands with maybe some supercells. And then we're talking about a little bit earlier with landfall. So actually, NAM has it at an early landfall at around maybe 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock central time. And that we're going to be really watching out for some embedded supercells within this storm. Even watching out maybe for intense squall line once we get towards Saturday night. And that'll obviously bring some really heavy rain for portions of Georgia by Sunday. KFAS as well won't be too shabby. Like I did repeat in yesterday's video, you do not need actually really high KFAS for severe weather when it comes to tropics or when it comes from the actual tropical systems. By Friday, even actually noon, we're already getting KFAS of over 1,000 joules per kilogram, which is enough to sustain severe weather for tropics. And we're actually seeing 3,000 plus joules per kilogram, 3,000 plus joules per kilogram within Louisiana when those outer bands and actually eye wall. If we even do have an eye wall, but you get what I mean, where those we had those strongest storms kind of surrounding the low. Shear is going to be a really big threat here because we're going to be seeing a ton of shear within the region here, maybe 85 knots between 0 to 6 kilometers. So overall, watching out for some intense severe weather for this whole area. Really watching out for some intense severe weather, even some severe weather threats even by Saturday, we're watching out for an increasing amount of shear for Alabama. So even I think it's still going to be a big area to watch out for severe weather when it comes to the Gulf Coast to Dixie Alley. Helicity is going to be very high between 0 to 3 kilometers. It's going to be seeing up to 1,700 meters square per second squared. I know that's awfully high. I mean, that's something you typically do not see that high number-wise. But again, we're considering a ton of vorticity, actually tropical vorticity. So once this makes landfall, helicity is obviously going to be high because vorticity is rotation in the atmosphere, and so is helicity. So it's obviously going to be high if we're talking about tropical vorticity. Overall GFS showing some really heavy amounts of rain. Actually, 18Z already has now up to 8 inches of portion of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. While 12Z, if we go to 12Z, they actually do have up to maybe half a foot even near Georgia and Alabama. And last but not least, let's go ahead and look at the wave height, maximum wave height, individual wave height. So we're actually going to be seeing as high as 27 feet. And then we're only talking about maybe 7-foot waves, 8-foot waves for the actual coast, which is why the storm surge will be a little bit lower. I could not get that out of my mind. But hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys later.